Welcome to Pursuing Joy, where we share audacious stories of joy-infused strength. I want to welcome Brooke back, but also put it out there that if you have not watched part one, we have a part one and a part two, stop now and go look at part one of Beauty and His Boundaries with Brooke Helms, and then come back here to part two, which will give you a lot more context for what we are discussing today. Welcome back, Brooke.
Thank you.
And remind me of actually, let me ask you this. Have you come up with a subtitle for your book since the last time we
I have
spoke?
not.
Okay.
No subtitle. It's too
Okay.
many words.
All right. Beauty
Yeah.
and His Boundaries is the book. And do you think it'll come out this year?
No.
Okay.
I'm hoping next year.
Okay.
My goal is to have it finished this year, by the end of this year. It's a big goal, but I don't think it'll be like edited and released and all that until next year. So
Okay.
hopefully the beginning of next year.
And I do want to add something, and I didn't tell you this, but just in the context of why I believe stories matter so much. Like, someone may get the impression that like you and I have been lifelong friends, and I know like the inner ins and outs of your life and what this story is. But I was thinking about it yesterday, and I was like, okay, you and I'm pretty sure, like, I started school in Collierville in the 3rd grade. And so did you go to Collierville from like kindergarten
First grade.
all the
Yeah.
way? Okay.
First
Okay.
grade. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So we probably have known, like, we know each other from school, and I'm pretty sure we played the flute together in middle school. Is that?
Well, I played the trumpet in middle school, so
Did
maybe
you? Okay.
we were in band together,
Okay, we were in
maybe.
band together.
Yeah.
Okay, so I remember that, and then I feel like, and I based on what you were saying about high school versus college, I'm pretty sure where we ventured off on separate paths because I don't
Yeah.
really
No,
remember.
because people have asked me like, "Oh, were y'all friends in high school?" And I was like, "I know we knew each other, and I think
Right,
we had some classes together." And I remember, you know, being friendly and
right.
talking. And it's not like we weren't not friends, but we didn't hang out with, and maybe
The
we had some mutual friends, but we weren't like in the same group or something,
right,
we
yeah.
hang out
And
in the
I think we
same group.
graduated with a class of like 700.
Yeah, and it's like
Right,
we didn't hang out outside of school, but
right,
we were friends in school kinda thing. Yeah,
right,
so I was like,
right.
"Yeah, we really weren't close at
Yeah,
all," you know? But we
and I had
just
to
kinda
consider that.
yeah,
But so then, the world of social media
yeah,
enters, and your story also about the, like, go you weren't really tempted to do anything off the beaten path
right, in high
until
school.
like college.
Till later, yeah.
Yeah. And so I really like drove this home with my girls actually afterwards, because they are very different than who I was at their
Mm,
age. They're doing very well,
mhm,
and
mhm,
very Christ following children. And I was like, this is what you have to look out for, because you haven't really been exposed to a lot to have
yeah,
this time, but it will come.
yes.
Um, so with social media, I mean, I have I think we both probably have lots of friends on there that I could go through my list of social media friends right now and be like, I have no idea,
Um,
especially with my travels.
yes,
Like,
that you meet one time or you
right,
have one event together. Yeah, I definitely have those where I've looked through, I'm like, "Oh my goodness, I do not remember how I know this
right,
person," you know?
exactly.
Yeah.
So that to say, when you started sharing on your blog and on social media about your miscarriages and Brecken's birth and everything, that was hugely impactful for me, just from a distanced
Mm,
way.
mm,
And it's interesting because last weekend when I was reading through your book, so uh, you so in 2019, like the dates line up almost perfectly when you were sharing about Brecken's death, and then where I had like decided that God had tricked me
Mm,
and bamboozled me and doesn't actually answer prayer,
mm,
and uh, just based on events going on in my life at the time. And that was hugely influential in me getting back in line with the will of God and trusting Him again based on how you were responding to the things that were going on in your life that were much harder than what I was experiencing. And I had to have like a moment of forgiving God. A
yeah,
friend of mine told me to write a letter to him and do that,
mm,
and which was very odd for me. I was even apologizing for that in, my letter.
yeah.
But there was this resentment there, and your experience helped uncover
Mm,
that and free me from that.
yeah,
Well, then this last weekend, so in the meantime, and again, I'm not equating this to your hospital experience at all, but 2 weeks ago, my daughter, suddenly had to have her appendix out.
mm,
And and again, was not like this, there was nothing life-threatening about this. It was just a total loss of control. Like,
yes.
once you put your child over into the hands of a
Oh,
doctor,
yeah, right,
uh,
that yeah, handing them over to people you don't even know,
and they
and
say that they're the expert,
yes,
and they
and
prob and they probably are.
their life is in their hands, you have
Yes,
no
yes.
control.
And my daughter was making fun of me because we had to see several doctors, and I actually saw more than one surgeon, and she's like, "Are you going to argue and boss around every single doctor during this experience?" And I was like, maybe, because I just was not on board with the process.
Mm,
I knew what the end result needed to be, but crazy enough, I was like, "Oh my gosh, I cannot believe you just said to me." The one surgeon that was sending me to a different surgeon, he was like, "If this were my child." And I was
mm,
like, "Oh my gosh, I recently just
yes,
heard that." And I was like, "Okay, all bets are off.
yeah, you're like, "Okay, this"
I surrender.
yes,
We'll do it your way." And in that process, I felt like something that I hadn't let go of got dug up in there, and there were several
mm,
things in that, like even my ex-husband was present in the process, and that brought up its
oh,
own things. But last Saturday night, I was finishing up your book, and I God kind of revealed to me that there was some residual effects going all the way back to 2019 that I was still holding on to.
mm,
And I was like, how can this full circle moment be happening right now when it was Brooke's story that dug that up in the first place? And I would have never thought I was holding on to any of that. But the lack of control, honestly, being in a children's hospital, if you are ever questioning whether we're in a fallen world or not,
mhm,
that that will open your eyes to it.
for sure.
And
Mm,
then the experience I was having with my ex-husband in that, I uh, and I'm not gonna say the vision because it was really harsh what God what God showed me. I was very
mhm,
embarrassed that that's the way I was viewing him and had no
mm,
clue. But that same night while I was reading through your book, and your book is very, like, leading people down the path of trust and obedience and the goodness of God, but I got so angry on your behalf on that last Saturday night. I was like, okay, just this proves that uh, the opposite of what you were saying. But it was the fact that some of that had been dug up, and I went to bed angry.
mm,
And Sunday morning, all of that came off or up was lifted off of me that Sunday morning, and
mm,
I had no idea that I wasn't walking in freedom, but now I know, like, the
mm,
complete difference of
gosh,
that. So I'm
that's
sharing
awesome.
that, wanting to let you know that.
Yeah, well, thank you for sharing that,
Uh,
that's awesome.
that
I mean,
you're go ahead.
that's why I wanna do it, that's why I am open to sharing and vulnerable, because if it can help somebody else, I mean, that's part of why we go through suffering too, is to share it.
Right. To comfort those and
Mhm.
mourn with those are mourning and rejoice with
Yeah,
those who are rejoicing. So
yeah.
I want to encourage you that the work that you're doing does matter, and I want to encourage others that their story matters
Mhm, mhm,
also, and that it can provide such release in a way that you do not
mm.
even
That you
know
don't
that.
even know. Yeah, because it is easy to get discouraged and feel like this is all for naught, or why is all this happening, or, because you don't see it, unless, like even people you don't know well may be impacted, and you may never know. I may never know. So
Yes, I have a feeling on the other side when we get to heaven,
mm,
you will see the multitudes,
yeah.
especially once this book comes out, I believe. So actually, let's start there. What prompted you to do that, and what were you? Do you believe the book will provide guidance? Do you believe it will provide hope? Like what prompted you to do that, and what would be your goal?
Yeah, I just felt, several months ago, it just I just have felt like this year, especially, God just really working just in my heart and working in our lives, working in my husband's life, just our call to ministry has been so great this past year, like so much more powerful, especially in Josh, where it's like that's what he wants to do all the time. He just has such a heart for ministry, for men's ministry mostly, but also just to share the gospel with people, whoever that may be. And I felt like it was just on my heart so much. And I started a year ago, I guess I started leading a women's Bible study because I just, like both of us, just had this desire for discipleship. We felt like there just wasn't enough discipleship that,
It's a rare
I,
thing, I think.
I feel like it's
Today.
not, yes, we just both have seen that there's just such a need, and people don't even know what discipleship is, or people that have been Christians for years are like, I don't think I was ever discipled. They're just not equipped. We're supposed to be disciple. We're supposed to make disciples who also make disciples. And, we just weren't seeing much of that. So we both just felt like, what can we do? What can we do? My husband was just really out there, you know, doing a program at our church it's called Every Man a Warrior. And it's about just discipling men. So he was, having a few guys at a time, discipling them and then equipping them. And then they would go and disciple other men. And so I could see that, I could already see that ripple.
Okay.
And so I started a Bible study that was just about, um, the book was called True Woman 101. It was a really old study,
Oh,
but it was just
I
kind of,
like the older ones.
yeah, it was like
Yes.
written in the 90s or something. And some of the references were funny, and some of the pictures, we would kind of joke about because it was really dated, but so applicable still to today. And just what is a woman? What is a biblical woman? What does that mean to live out biblical womanhood? And so we did that for a year, or I did that for a year. And I don't know, just through that, I just felt compelled to, like, what more can I do? And I don't know, I just felt like God was telling me, you have so much wisdom that I've given you from your trials and from what you've gone through, that you need to be sharing that. And I've shared little bits and pieces, but I've never just come out and shared everything. So I just felt like he was, excuse me, my phone. Thought I turned it off. I felt like he was just saying, you need to write it all down. You need to write it all out. And I'm like, I'm not a writer, but I kind of, in my mind, when Brecken was little, I had in my head that I was going to write a book about her one day. That I was going to write a book about being a mother to a blind child. And I just thought, when she gets older, I'm going to have all this wisdom of how to raise a blind child. And I'm going to write a book for other
Okay.
mothers who maybe have children with special needs or who may be blind or whatever. So I always thought I was going to write that book one day. And that was not the book that God had for me to write. So I always kind of felt like he was telling me, you're going to write a book one day, but I just didn't. I just had a different plan than he did.
Okay.
So this book is not how to raise a child who's blind, but because I didn't, I had her for 4 years, but just life didn't go the way that,
Mhm.
the way that you think. Um, Not that I couldn't still give wisdom on how to be a mother of a child who's blind,
Right.
but
I would say there's you're walking a journey of a different kind of blindedness
yes.
and
So
opening our eyes
yeah, so my
to that.
journey changed. My plan changed. God's plans for me were not what I thought they were. So it just happened just, kind of one day. He was like, this is what you're going to write. You're going to write it about suffering and you're going to write about what you've learned through it. And just instantly, the topics, he brought the topics to my mind of just the different topics that I've learned. And I just had like immediately the table of contents of my book, like right away. And I'm like, okay, I don't feel like this is a coincidence. I feel like this is going to happen.
Yeah.
And he just started bringing, parts of my story and how that related to different things I've learned, like trusting God, being obedient, having contentment, having peace, having joy, and all that that he has taught me how to have all that through suffering. So all that to say, my hope is that my book gives people encouragement, that though there is suffering and hardship in this world, that there's purpose in it and you can find joy, you can find peace,
Mhm.
and ultimately the hope. And that's kind of where I'm going to end the book. The last chapter is the hope. The hope is in Christ. And,
Yeah.
in this world, you're going to have suffering no matter if you have Jesus or if you don't. So, my hope is that people will choose Jesus because that's just better. That's a better way to go through life, go through hardship. You're going to go through it with or without him. So,
Yeah.
that, you know,
Mhm. So the girls and I are going through because I very much am in an unexpected wilderness season right now. And I stumbled across like a series that John Bevere did on a wilderness season.
mhm,
And so I'm I'm having trouble explaining this to the girls myself of like what we're experiencing and why, especially after the things that we have experienced in the past.
mm,
And last night, we were on there's like 10 lessons and we're on lesson 6. And he brought up a different version of First Corinthians 10:13 that I hadn't heard before. But it made me think. So it says, God keeps his promise and he will not allow you to be tested beyond your power to remain firm. And so I started thinking, okay, that power could have healed Brecken, right? Like that he has that power in him.
yes,
But then
yeah,
I was looking and I was thinking, but that power was used in a different way because it was used for your healing. Like that, feel like that's pretty miraculous for your family overall
mhm,
and what you're able to accomplish and do like that it's that same resurrection power just used in a very different way. And that I think that's the difference between suffering with Jesus and suffering without Jesus. I know people that have ended up in mental facilities that have gone through the deaths of
mhm.
their children,
I
right? Like
imagine,
they just they're because it's not something that you can do in your own strength. So
no,
I just was thinking about how it's it's the same power. It may not be used in the way that we expected it. And I think that, I mean, I think this is being, well, I know this is being used in like huge, huge ways. Um, let's talk about though, because so we ended the last episode with your worship, basically, of like, okay, you were in this place, you were able to worship God during Brecken's funeral, but
Mhm.
I certainly, and I know you don't want people to think, okay, well then we just were able
It
to
was just yeah,
go on about our
yeah,
lives because of the power of Jesus Christ.
right.
Uh, so can you walk us through that first day, week, month, and even
Mm,
how, because I know from my own experience what my children have seen uh and when I'm on my worst days, and I've had
mm,
to apologize for some of that. So I think
yeah,
grieving with children is on a whole nother level than just grieving yourself, and plus you're a daughter and you're a wife. So um walk us through some of that.
yeah. So, the first, the first days and weeks are just, gosh, just so painful. I mean, you're just in such pain that you can't see, you can't see any good. You can't see how it'll ever get better. There was like the day after she passed away, her funeral was like 4 days after she passed away. So, those few days, even before her funeral, uh, it was like, I don't know, I can't even explain it. You wake up for just a second forgetting that this is your life. And then when you come to and you remember what has happened, I mean, it just like takes the breath out of you. And there were days I just remember right after her passing. Thankfully, my mom was with us because, I had a baby, I had a newborn, and I could not take care of her. I could not even get out of the bed. I just remember I got out of the bed one morning and made it to the bathroom, and then I couldn't leave the bathroom floor. I was just on the floor, broken. I mean, I was just, anyways, just Josh had to come and pick me up and get me. And my mom, was in the other room with Ollie, trying to take care of her. My mom was grieving too. This was her
Right.
grandchild. And, I cannot imagine hearing your child,
Yeah.
she was just right down the hall, hearing your child just crying and moaning and just
Mhm.
physical pain because, so my mom was given so much strength in that time too, I think, because she was having to take care of my other
Everybody.
child.
Yeah.
She was having to take care of my child, and then she's seeing her child suffer, so I can only imagine that pain too, if anyone, when we see our child suffer, it just breaks our hearts.
Mhm.
So that aspect of it. And then Harper was, like you said, grieving with children. Harper, I don't know that she fully, she didn't know how to do that. Um, she knew she could hear me in there crying. She was like, "Mommy's in there crying. Mommy's," you know, that's what she remembers from those first days. She's like, "All I
Right.
remember is mom and dad just cried all the time." And, it was like we couldn't do anything else. So it was just so raw and painful those first few days. It was like, "God, take me." Like, I wanted the Lord to take me too. I was like, "I'm no good to anybody here. I cannot do this. Just take me too. Just, you know, I want to be with Brecken. And it was like I knew I still had responsibilities on this
Yeah.
earth. But at the time it was like, well, I can't do them anyways. I'm no good to anybody. Just take me. Um, but there would be those, people ask like, how did you get through that? Even, a couple of people that have listened to my first podcast and were like, how are you able to worship right after that? Like I've lost someone close to me. And there's no way I was able to worship right after. And I'm like, it it literally was a moment by moment strength. You know, the 5 minutes before I went out in that service, I was not okay. I did not have
Mhm.
any strength. Um, but it was like he gave me the strength that minute to do what I needed to do. So, yeah, I was crying on the bathroom floor and couldn't get up at that moment. But 2 days later, I had to get up and go to the funeral home and pick out my child, my daughter's casket and plan her service. And God gave me the strength in that time period to do that, where it was like,
Right.
there's no way you can do that on your own strength, which I can see why people end up in a mental facility, because if I didn't rely on the strength of the Lord, I would not have gotten out of that bathroom floor. And they probably would have had to cart me off to some
Mhm.
mental facility. Um, so it was just, yeah, I can't even, I feel like I was just numb. Ollie was, it was so hard to be her mom. And I feel almost guilty for that first year of her life because it was kind of a blur. And she was meeting all these little milestones, all the things
Yeah.
that you get joyful about, like the first time she rolled over and the first time she crawled and the first words. That was all that time period where I was in such grief that it was such a, I
Like
don't
you
know.
were kind of in I would say like zombie mode.
Yeah, oh,
Like
for
some
sure.
of that's like blacked out. Let me give you a little grace though. It's your third child, and some of that would have been that way
Well,
anyways.
that's true because even before Brecken passed away, I was in like zombie mode because
Right.
you have 3 children, you're not sleeping, you know. So I still had a little bit of that even before. Um, but it was that I remember Ollie rolled over, I think for the first time, and this was like 2 weeks after Brecken passed away, and my mom was with me, and we were like, "Yay," praising Ollie. She rolled over and then immediately cried, like tears,
Um,
because we were like, it was that back and forth between like joy and pain, joy and sorrow. We were like trying to have joy, but then we immediately remembered, but Brecken's not here. And then the sorrow came. So there was a lot of that the first year, just
yeah.
highs and lows, joy, sorrow, just back and forth, because, so many things were happening with the kids and Ollie, just all the little things you look forward to when they're little, when they're in their first year. And you almost felt guilty, I think, if you felt any joy. At least I did. Like,
Mhm.
how can I have joy right now? I just lost my child. And then I felt guilty if I didn't have joy because that was unfair to Ollie. She needed a mom that was fully present, and I felt like I wasn't that first year. So
Yeah, that's a
that was
tender
a
time.
hard
Yeah.
dynamic.
Yeah.
Um,
How would you say, and if you don't want to share, so you just tell me because I for me, uh, it's when I'm sharing my story and I end up bringing other people into it and they're not there to share their perspective on it.
yeah.
So you tell me if you want to if you're okay with this direction. So you're grieving versus your husband's grieving and how y'all met each other or didn't during that time.
Yeah. Um, yeah, we did grieve differently. He grieved very privately, I think. And so For me, sometimes I felt like he wasn't grieving as much as I was. Like, I thought,
Because it wasn't outward or, like, demonstrative, or he wasn't
yeah, I felt
feeling
like,
it.
I would just cry at the drop of a hat and be a basket case all the time. And I felt like he was holding it together more, but he wasn't. He was trying to be strong for me and the kids, and then when he was alone in his truck driving to work, or when he was wherever by himself, he would be breaking down. And I learned that later,
Mhm.
but at the time, uh, I felt like you're not as sad, or you're not grieving as much, or you're not showing it. But he just showed it in different ways, and he got comfort in different ways. Um, like, he's a big duck hunter, and um, he said, he's like, I know that it doesn't make any sense, but he felt like closer to God and closer to Brecken when he would be out in the woods.
Mhm.
And I know, men say that, like, I'm close to God when I'm in the woods, I don't need to be at church. I'm out in the wood, I worship in the woods, and it wasn't anything like that. It was just,
The nature and the silence of it.
yeah. And I think, like, he got to see the sunrise every day that he would hunt. They'd start out in
Mhm.
the dark, and he got to see the sunrise and just all the brilliant colors. And it just reminded him of, like, Brecken is seeing all these brilliant colors, all these colors we can't even see. And he just felt like he felt closer to her, like she was with him, and he felt closer to the Lord. So whereas where I thought, like, how could you still go duck hunting? How could you still go
Right.
out there? Like, don't how can you enjoy that? Because for me, a lot of the things that it was hard at first to still enjoy the things that I could enjoy before. There
Mhm.
was no enjoyment. That was really difficult. Um, but he was like, he would try to explain it to me. He's like, I can't explain it to you, but it's like the place where I go, where I feel like the warmth of Brecken's love and God's love. And I was like envious of that, because I was like, I don't have that place. I don't
Right.
have somewhere I can go. So that was one of the ways that was different. He could go there. Some people go to the graveside to
Mhm.
talk to their loved one. I've never done that, because I felt like she's not here. This is not her. She is it.
Right.
That never was a draw for me to go sit at the cemetery. That didn't make me feel closer to her,
Closer, yeah.
or closer to God. Um, but a lot of people have that place, and I just didn't have that. So that was hard, because that is kind of where he was drawn to. Um,
I
so
I
that
know
that
in
Go ahead.
like, the book that we were discussing before, Stephen Curtis Chapman's,
Yeah.
autobiography, they talked about how, on down the line, maybe one of them would wake up in grief and the other one wouldn't, and they were stifled in that day, but the other one was feeling fine
Yeah,
that day.
yeah. And I think that, that can be a good thing. I think God allows that, because, Josh was able to be strong when I was weak, and I was able to be strong when he was weak. Um, so he could kind of give me comfort when I needed it, and vice versa. But there would be just things out of the blue. That's another thing that you don't or that you don't know, that because grief is not linear. It is
Mm-mm.
not like grieve, 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 and then it just slowly tapers off until you're just fine. It's all over the place. So you may think, you may have a couple good days, and then all of a sudden, boom, it comes right back. Or you'll have a couple good or years will go by, and then all of a sudden you'll just dive deep down into this pit of grief that you're like, where did this come from? And it
Mhm.
hits you all of a sudden and out of the blue. Um, and we've come to, like, learn that about each other, because I will just be in tears all of a sudden, and Josh will say, "What's wrong?" And I'm like, "My child is gone. That's what's wrong." Like, I'll just have to say, like, "I miss Brecken," and he'll just know, like, immediately, okay, she's just, this bout of grief has hit her.
Right.
And sometimes it lasts really short and you cry and you're sad for maybe a few minutes and then you're like, okay, I can move on. And then sometimes it lingers longer, even years, even now. I mean,
Mhm.
it's still, you know, um, so we had to communicate. I think in the beginning, we're not, if you don't communicate that, it can divide, draw you apart from each other. And
Right.
so we had to learn communication. Communication in marriage about everything is important. But now we had this new aspect of something that we had to communicate with each other about. So eventually we were able to draw closer to each other because we could kind of understand where the other one was coming from. And things that bothered him didn't bother me, like songs. Uh, for example, I shared in the first podcast about Great Are You, Lord, that was
Mhm.
played at her funeral. And that was like, something I can reflect on. It was a time of hope for me, because the Lord just gave me strength in that moment to be able to worship him. Whereas Josh didn't have that same experience with that song. So he has a hard time even now hearing that song. But for me, it gives me hope. It's a reminder of God's faithfulness. So for me, that's a positive thing. But for him, it's like I can't listen to that song.
Okay.
You know, and there's other things like that where songs that he can listen to and I can, or songs
Mhm.
I like and he doesn't. We just have to be aware of that. A song will come on of the radio and he'll be like, we have to turn that off. Or we'll be in a store. We've been in a store and a song comes on and we have to leave the store because one of us
Affected.
is affected and it's like a physical pain. Like I can't do this right now. I can't listen to this. It's
Right.
too painful. And now we know, or if I'm like, I gotta go. He's like, all right, let's go,
I
because
think
we
that's beautiful. I mean,
share
because
that.
not all couples are gonna have that deep level of understanding. And choose to go there even, or
Yeah.
choose to understand. So, I think that's a beautiful element of your
Yeah.
marriage
And
that
even with children, you were saying, like with Harper, like Ollie obviously was a baby. She doesn't remember.
right.
She didn't go through that period of grief because she didn't know. But Harper did. And even now, I mean, we still talk now about it. And we even have to still cope with things now that she didn't know how to share when she was 7 years old. She didn't understand, but now that she's 13, she can vocalize more
Right.
about it. And just her and I being aware of different, like her and I, some of our triggers are the same. Like there are some songs or some things that trigger both of us. Or, we like to read together and we'll like to have a book that we're reading together. And like a few years ago, we were reading one and there was a little girl that got sick and passed away in the book. And we both just started crying. We had to shut the book and like put it away. And I think we did end up finishing the book, but we had to take a break. But the fact that she could like verbalize that to me, or the fact that I could say, you know what, I know that you're sad and you're crying. It's because it hits really close to home because it was from the perspective of like a little boy. I'm like,
Yeah.
this little boy lost his sister and you lost your sister. And that is why this is so painful. So just being able to communicate that with your children too. Um, that's been kind of a beautiful thing that I've gotten to share with Harper. Like
Mhm.
it sucks that she had to go through that and that she's still having to go through that. Just having had lived through that experience, her life is always going to be different in many ways, but um,
I think it ages and matures,
for
but
sure.
um, because I was listening to a Beth Moore podcast, and she was putting together this panel of, uh, of people that were like 60 and above, to share their wisdom and their insights on different things. But
Mm.
there's she allowed like a 35 to 40-year-old woman to come on there because of what she had experienced in her early 20s, because she had the
Mm.
same amount of wisdom that the others had lived, longer.
Yeah.
And I know you and I were also talking about our oldest
Mhm.
being kind of at a different kind of level than the other children of their age based on
Yes.
what they experienced early on. But I
Yeah.
also think they are gonna be great disciplers, going
Yeah.
forward
Yeah,
as
that's my prayer, because it can be really difficult being 13. Being a 13-year-old girl is hard in general,
well. Right.
but especially when she has gone through what she's gone through, and her perspective on life is completely different than other 13-year-olds, and it's really hard for her to relate. It's hard for her to fit in sometimes,
Mhm.
um, because just like the everyday cares of this world are just different, she doesn't
Yes,
have that. Like, she likes typical 13-year-old girl stuff, but I think she has more of an eternal perspective, just
yes,
like our whole Josh and I do as well, and that can be really difficult because not a lot of people have that, and it can be hard to understand other people, especially her age.
yes. Okay, since we're heading that way, let's, uh let's talk a little bit about that, having that
Yeah.
eternal perspective, or this di kind of like what your marriage is different because of this. Like, y'all have a
Mhm,
depth that other
mhm.
marriages probably don't have. I would say you probably have a depth with the Lord that, other Christians may not have experienced. So, and I know when we talked way back at the beginning, you were talking a little bit about a loneliness, um,
Mhm.
and like within your community because of that. Can you shed some light on that and what that looks like amongst your Christian peers, with that differing perspective?
Yeah, um, I think, going through this after we lost Brecken, my mindset just completely changed, and I think part of it is because a piece of me is in heaven now,
Right.
that like, my perspective on heaven completely changed. Whereas before I know, like, I was that Christian. I said, like, "Oh, yes, I long for heaven," and, we fix our eyes on what is unseen and not what is seen. I would have agreed with all that, but practically, I don't think I was living that, which I think a lot of Christians aren't. I don't see that a lot in real life, but a switch flipped after Brecken passed away, and so part of it was, yes, I felt like a piece of my heart was in heaven, but the other part of it was that I just saw that life is such a vapor because I saw it firsthand
Mhm.
in my own life, in my own family, and how we are a dot. Eternity is this unending, you know,
Yeah.
I've I've heard the illustration where someone took this rope that, was 100 yards long, and there was one little red dot at the end, and we're like, "This is your life, and this is the rest of your life. This is your life around this earth, and this is eternity." And so, the phrase, like, "Live for the line, not the dot." And that just became so real to me. I completely understood what that meant. And Josh and I both. I think it took him a little bit longer, maybe. We just with our, uh, our
Your
uh,
different grief journeys.
yes, and just our growth in the Lord.
Mhm.
Um, anyways, just kind of on different timetables, but now at this point, your perspective on what is important just changes completely. And I just think the Lord has given me that in a way that he hasn't given others. And I know there are other people who have gone through similar things that probably do have it, but it is hard to find. And um, it can have some loneliness because even your Christian friends don't fully understand. And because they haven't walked the road you've walked. Everyone has walked something, everyone has gone through hard times. The Lord has called everyone through difficulties and hardships. But something like this, you know, it's just, there are so many things in this earth that don't matter anymore to me, that just I see so many things are just temporary. And it really changes the way we live our life. It changes the way that we spend our money. It changes the way that we go on vacations. It changes the way that we raise our children. And it is not common to see that, and um, I don't know. So it can feel lonely. It can feel like sometimes we're the only one doing da 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 da
Right.
da,
That or that have had, like, that layer peeled back
yes, it's
towards
like
you.
the veil has been removed. There's just a
Mhm.
thinner veil between here and heaven, between here and eternity for me. And even though other people, like if you took a poll of all the Christians in this area or in our church, most of them would agree that yes, we should not store up treasures on this earth, but treasures in heaven. We should focus on what is unseen and not what is seen. And but when I look at how they live their lives or whatever,
Mhm.
I don't
No,
know. It's
yeah,
just,
I hear you.
and not that I'm doing anything any better than
Right.
anyone. It's just different.
You
And
have a
just really,
different lens to look through.
yes, different lens. I think everyone does have a certain lens that they see the world through because of their past, their history, their experiences. It's just like someone who is maybe called to the foreign mission field, like they're called to go to China and live and be a missionary over there, you know, like they're going to live their life totally different than someone here that may be also called to some type of ministry, but just in a different way. Um,
Yeah, yeah,
And, and we still don't do everything perfectly. There's still, I mean, obviously we're still human and sinful, but there are just some things that I don't know, just the that we do differently. And it's hard to find some common ground sometimes with people,
yes.
and not that we don't have great Christian friends who love us and encourage us and who are kind and loving, and all that. And we're so grateful. But it is sometimes um Can
Isolating.
feel can feel isolating, yeah, because even though they say they feel the same way, I feel like they don't have that, perspective like we
Yeah,
do,
yeah.
and they can't because they haven't been through it, and,
Well,
that's just
even
where God
people
has them.
yeah, even people that have been through, um, like, similar circumstances may respond to it in a very
Yes,
different way. And may be circling the same mountain with the same grief in the same
true.
way because they haven't surrendered it or decided to walk with God, even if they believe God in that. Because so when we did the first podcast, I had come off of a very intense, like, Christian women's retreat. And one of my takeaways from that was like, "Oh my gosh, y'all are all so messed up, just like
Mhm,
me." And I have not been able and, like, messed up, know it, and are walking with Jesus. And
mm,
I just have not seen a lot of that in my Christian
mhm.
community, or either people just aren't revealing it. I don't
Or maybe
know.
they're right, they're just not honest about it or open
Right.
about it,
Yeah.
maybe.
But it is very eye-opening because, like, you could go to some, like, women or moms who have lost children kind of, like, retreat or something,
Yeah.
and still you could find people that are responding to it in very different ways
Yeah.
too. So
Yeah.
um, I people experiencing grief or even being like a heavenly spiritual being on this earth and truly knowing that you're a heavenly spiritual being and walking on this planet is a huge difficulty,
Mhm.
I think.
Mhm.
It just is.
It is. I think, my husband and I were talking last night. You sent me a question that, like, what would you I can't remember what it was, about grief. How would you like, what do you wish you knew now that you didn't know
Oh,
then,
right, right,
kinda
yes.
thing? And, we were both talking about how your life is going to completely change, especially for us, like, specifically for us. Like, we knew our life was gonna change because we lost a child, and so, of course, our family and our life was never gonna look the same ever again. But deeper than that, like, your life is going you're going to have to make some big decisions. You're gonna be living what the culture probably will be called radical, and you might not be accepted even in Christian circles for the way that you're gonna choose to do some of the things that you
Mhm.
do. And it's not necessarily a bad thing, but just be ready for your life to just to look totally different. And I mean, it does. I feel like our life now looks totally different than our life did even when Brecken was here. Um, just yeah, it just does. And, every decision that we make, we look through the lens of eternity, and it's like, is this is this a temporal thing? And not that you can't, not that we don't still, like, have fun and, you
Right, no,
know,
I know what you're
go on a vacation with our family or with our friends, but I don't know, just every little thing is like, we just have a different lens, you know?
okay, so um, with that, I was already thinking about this, and then what the girls that I watched last night brought this up again, and I know, um, like, you have some killer abs. I've seen your your beach pictures. I'm always like, one day. So I know you know about weight, like weight lifting and doing
Yeah,
like
strength
exercise.
training and
Yes, yes,
weightlifting, yeah.
yes. So this analogy was brought up of like the weight that you were asked to bear at one time felt like it was going to kill you.
Mhm, mhm.
And now those asks from God don't feel as weighty because you've
Mhm.
already lifted such a huge weight. And I mean, that's what weight training does, right? Like it prepares you for a bigger
Yeah,
and heavier
yeah, you
thing.
start with the small weights and yeah, you increase your weight and then
And you can't go way ahead or you will hurt yourself,
yeah,
right?
exactly,
Like
you'll be injured and, you'll be out for a week because you can't walk,
yeah.
You lifted too heavy or whatever, you can't move your arms. Uh,
So do you feel like so I one of the questions I asked what would you label that season of going through this as a wilderness? Would you take it up a notch? Like, what would you call that season? And then how has it made the asks less weighty going forward?
Yeah, I think I would consider it a wilderness, especially at first because, when I think about a wilderness, I feel like just like the desert, um, you know, just like a dry, dreary place. And right away, I felt like I felt like God wasn't even there. I felt like He had deserted me. And I didn't feel like I had a purpose. I think that was one of the biggest things for me right away that I've since learned. A big takeaway that God has taught me is my true purpose cannot be found in anything other than Him.
Mhm.
And I felt like my purpose was taken away after Brecken passed away because I had found purpose in her and being her mom, being a mom of a child with special needs. That was who I was. I felt like that was my identity. And when I lost her, I lost that identity. I think that's another thing that you're not prepared for with something like that, is that you don't just lose a person, you lose everything associated with that person.
Mhm.
So because I had kind of put my identity and my purpose in her, I lost a purpose, I lost my identity, and then we lost people, because we had friends and relationships related because of Brecken. She had a lot of,
Oh, right, okay.
she had a lot of therapists and she had great teachers. And when you no longer go to those therapies and you no longer see those teachers, I mean, all those people are out of your life, unless you make a intentional effort to stay in contact. But, it just, so it's like a whole aspect of my life was gone too. Um, so that was a really big thing for me that I struggled with, was finding my purpose. um, I think being stripped of what you thought made you who you are,
Mhm.
you know, just allows you to fully know that you can only rely on the Lord. So I did that True Woman 101 study that I was talking about earlier. I did that book with a group at our church. I don't know, a few years after Brecken passed away, and I was still kind of struggling with my purpose at that time. And I was like, okay, I felt like God was really using me before she passed away. Like God was using me in other moms' lives, and I was able to be an encouragement. God was using me in Brecken's life, and then when I lost her, I felt like, okay, God can't use me anymore. I'm not being used. I can't do any good for Him. I was, so now it was just really hard to find, okay, like what good is coming from this? I
Mhm.
wanted to believe that this suffering and this trial is not for nothing, that God has a purpose in it, but I wasn't finding it. And
Right, it felt like the
um,
story was over.
yeah, so I felt like, okay, that's it. Like, God, you could have done so much with her life and it was cut short. And, in my head, I thought he could have done so much more with her on this earth, like, why were you not ready? Why were you ready for her? Like, she wasn't ready. She needed to do
Mhm.
more on this earth. And, um, but that study really just talked about, what is your purpose as a woman? Who are you in Christ? How did God create you as a woman, specifically, um, in the garden? And, it just opened my eyes to my purpose is in Christ and not in being Brecken's mom, not in being Josh's wife. Those are all roles I have, but that is not my purpose. And that's part of why I wanted to teach that study too to other women, because it was so impactful to me at that time. And that was sort of, I think that was a little bit of a turning point for me when I could finally, I still didn't have direction in my life. I felt like I still didn't know, okay, God, I don't know how you're going to use me,
Right.
but I know that I still am here on this earth for a purpose, and that my identity is in Christ, not in my roles. And that was just so like freeing to me. It still was like, okay, I don't know what,
Right, right, right.
I don't know what you
You
have
got a
for
layer, you got to another layer to start.
me. Yeah. And the fact, like, women were created to be a helper, and that has or can have such a negative connotation, like, oh, we're just like a little helper, we're like an assistant while our husband does and goes and does all these great things in his career and his ministry or whatever, and we're just like gonna like clean the house and make sure that his clothes are washed. That's kind of how
That's how it's perceived. What
that's
is
how
it?
it's perceived. Yeah. But the word for helper is used so many times in the Bible referring to God,
Mhm.
as
Yes.
and in like a military term, even like with the Israelites, how the Lord was their helper to win all these battles,
Mhm.
and the Holy Spirit is our helper. So I mean, it's used to describe the triune God. And so that is a powerful thing to me. I'm like, okay, that's not nothing. That's not just a
Right.
little assistant. That is a huge thing. Um, and learning from that study that God created men and women, we are we are equal, as in we were both created the image of God, but we have different roles.
Mhm.
And but we're to use those in a complementary way. Like, also when like a couple years after Bracken passed away and I was still struggling with my purpose, I felt like Josh was just out there serving the Lord and ministering to people and discipling men. And I felt like I'm just sitting back doing nothing. I felt like, what's my purpose? He's doing all
Mhm.
these great things for God and leading other men to Christ and to closer walking with the Lord. And I'm just here. Um, But part of my role as a helper was to make sure that he was glorifying the Lord and he was able to serve out his purpose. I was helping him do that by being his wife, by being,
Mhm.
um, yeah, sometimes it was as insignificant as by making sure the home is taken care of.
Mhm.
But that's so he can go and do his job and come home and know that everything's taken care of. He could come home to a haven,
Right.
um,
Right.
you
It's a
know,
partnership. And yes, you do
yeah,
have your certain roles. And you can I understand the jealousy of like what one can
yeah.
be accomplishing
Yeah, and so I'm like,
versus
"Well, I
the
wanna be doing things like that for the
yeah.
Lord. Why does he get to and I don't?" But it's like God was like, "You have to wait on me and your role is important too, and you will be able to be used as well. It's just, maybe in different ways." Um, but our roles complement each other. We are not able to fully like, we were created in the image of God to glorify God. So we cannot alone glorify him in all of his attributes. Like God
Mhm.
is like as women, we're nurturing. That's one of our qualities. Well, men are not as nurturing, but God is nurturing. God is nurturing and compassionate. And women are more so than men. Just like men are created to be the protector.
Mhm.
God is also our protector, but women are not created to be the protector. So together we're able to fully glorify God as a as opposed to just, alone. And so that's why we men and women work together so well to fully encompass all of God's attributes and show them to the world together, So that was just so freeing to me in that time, like going through that wilderness of feeling alone, feeling abandoned, but also feeling like I have no purpose now. And then what he taught me, um, I felt like I had to walk through that for me to learn and for me to understand
Mhm.
that my purpose is only in Christ because I was stripped of everything else.
Yes. And
Um,
yeah, and uh mm, that what happened, I'm not going to call that a gift, but what you have received in the process, I would say is a gift because that
mhm.
is part of that like radical type of perspective uh that you're talking about. It makes those hard sayings a little more palatable
Yeah.
because of what you have experienced. So what are some of the things that you all have been asked to do as a couple, individually, by the Holy Spirit that is a easier yes now, you would say?
I mean, At this point, I feel like, you know, almost I won't say almost anything,
I know.
I won't say
What God?
anything, God, just bring it. Um, but one of the I don't know, when you say yes and you see how God calls you to do these things, like we talked about this a little bit, like how I'm an introvert by nature, but God has really brought me out of my comfort zone so much that now when he asks me to go out of my comfort zone for anything, I'm just like, okay,
Right.
um, like teaching that Bible study, that's not something that I naturally feel led to do. I don't feel like a natural leader or teacher by nature. Like that's not my personality, but
Mhm.
God has
Equipped
called me
you.
to do that and step up to do that. And now it's easier to say yes. Or when someone asks me, like when you asked me to do this podcast, I felt like it was like, yeah, sure, Whereas a couple years ago, it would have been like, oh, I don't think so. I don't know
Right.
that I can do that. And um, like a big yes that we had to say to God that I feel like is radical in this culture, in this where I live, is homeschooling.
Okay, that's where I was trying to get you.
Um, that was so uh, out of the blue. And my husband was homeschooled for a little bit, and um, and his siblings were. And so when we got married, I was like, don't think that we're going to homeschool our children. That's not going to happen. And I was adamant about that. Like, we are not going to homeschool because I had like a negative connotation. I didn't know enough about it. And it was just, especially when we were growing up, I didn't know anybody that was homeschooled. That's
Yeah.
just not what you did. And I remember in college, I met one girl that had been homeschooled and she was a little odd. And,
I mean,
you know,
I feel like everybody has that
that's,
story.
it's
That
still,
one
I mean,
person that stood out.
that's still a stereotype, and there are still really weird homeschoolers, like, I won't say that they're all just but, okay, there's also really weird people that go to public school too.
No, that is real.
Did you think about your high school, did you not know some weirdos in your public high school? Yes. So, um, anyways, but after Brecken passed away, like I said, your what is important and what is not important was just very clear, and at the time, Harper was in public school,
Brecken
and
had been in public school, right?
yes, Brecken was in public school too, in the preschool, and it was a great program, and we loved her teachers, and she learned so much, and she was able to get all her therapies there, and we were so grateful for that, and so we just loved our school, we loved the teachers, and I never thought that we were like, "Ollie's gonna go here, and maybe Ollie can be in the preschool, and she can have the same teachers that Brecken had, and they're all gonna go up through this school together," and, that was part of why we moved into our house, that we felt like our house was
Mhm.
just perfect because it was right there across from the school. So when when Harper started 3rd grade, it was right after COVID, and so they were still doing all the weird COVID restrictions where they had to, like, stay in their little square,
Mhm.
and they had to wear masks, and they did everything on their laptop and even, like, PE. They were, like, in a square in PE and playing games on the computer or something. It was
Oh
just
my
really weird.
gosh, okay.
Yeah. Um, so that was kind of the first thing that was like when Harper would come home from school and she'd tell me what she did. And I was like, you did nothing. You were there for 7 hours and you did nothing. And I was like, did you learn anything? Did you do this? Did you do that? I would name all the subjects. And she's like, we maybe did math, or we might have did this. And
Mhm.
I'm like, that maybe would have taken a couple hours. What did y'all do the rest of the day? So that was starting to feel like, okay, just kind of thinking about it. Like, what are we doing here? But then the Lord just kinda kept bringing to my mind, like, you are the primary discipler of your child, and I was, like, convicted of that, and talking to Josh, like, "When are we discipling our children?" At the time, Ollie was a baby, but, so it was just Harper, and I'm like, "We're not," because she's in school all day, 5 days a week, and when she gets home, she's tired, and she wants to
Mhm.
just veg out and play or eat a snack or, whatever. She's
Yeah.
been cooped up.
And you're combating the whatever she experienced, like, there's an undoing
So
as
yes,
well.
exactly. So I'm undoing all the things that they were taught during the day. Um, and when she'll come and tell me things, she would tell me something, I'm like, "Ooh, no, that's not quite right, da, 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 da," and I'm having to reteach her. And then, like, you're still having to do homework. Sure, having to do more school with your child, and then not to mention if they're involved in any type of extracurricular
Mhm.
activity, that takes up the other hours. And so we were trying to get up early. We were trying to wake up really early before school to have a little bit of like discipleship time. But again, I had an infant at the time, so I was already like lacking sleep, and so that was getting to be a struggle as well. So I just felt like I just kept being convicted like about the discipleship. That was the main thing. And I'm like, what are we going to do? And homeschooling just kept popping into my head. And I'm like, no, no, we're not going to do that. Is not an option. I cannot do that. And I was like, first of all, I work. I was working part-time. I was working 2 days a week, but it was still 2 10-hour days, like full days. And I was like, I would only have 3 days during the week to do this. Is that even possible? And what is she going to do on the other days? And um, so I kept pushing back. And I remember I was writing in my journal about praying about that. Like, I feel like God might be calling me to homeschool, but that seems ridiculous. And I have a baby and I'm still grieving the loss of my child. And you're calling me to homeschool. Like, I can't do this. And I fought it for months and months. And every time I would talk about it to anybody, I would just cry because I knew that God was working on my heart about
Uh-huh.
it. And I would share, I'd be like, I think God is calling me to homeschool. And I couldn't even get through the prayer request. I couldn't even get through the, talking about it without crying. Um, so I just
So
finally gave
what was
in.
sorry, I'm gonna interrupt
Go
you.
ahead.
What was your counsel? As in, what is your community telling you about
Well, so I have one friend, or at the time I had one friend who homeschooled, and she was one of my best friends from college. She did not live here, but she was one that I talked to a lot. And she was very like she had been homeschooling for years at this time, and she was very good about like she never tried to push homeschooling on anybody. She was like, everyone has to do what they're called to do, what they feel is best for their own child. So she never was like, you should homeschool. Homeschooling's the best. That's the way to go. She never was like that. She never was pushy about it. But when I came to her, she was just very good about talking it through with me. And she still never was like, yes, you need to homeschool. She never just came out and told me, but she talked it through with me. And she would encourage me, but also made me see kind of all the positive, we kind of talked about the pros and cons. Like, okay, yeah, maybe uh there could be a like the socialism, so not socialism,
I know, yeah, socializing.
socializing
Yes, yes, yes.
aspect that's what you get from everybody. Like, um, okay, if she's not gonna be in public school and maybe there's some activities that are public school related that she won't be have access to or, stuff like that. So we weighed out the pros and cons. But anytime I brought it up with anyone else that didn't homeschool, there wasn't there wasn't like negative, but there was just nothing. It was just kind of like, okay, or people would maybe think, "Oh, I think my neighbor homeschools. Maybe you could talk to her." Or, you
Right.
know,
But
um
they're not gonna be like, this is a good idea."
yeah, oh, no. Like, no one really said it was a good idea. And so I kinda had to go outside of my community to get any kind of, like, counsel or any kind of wisdom about it. Um, but anything like I follow a lot of podcasts, a lot of Christian podcasts,
Mhm.
and I felt that that was a big common theme in a lot of these Christian podcasters, that they either did homeschool their children or they supported homeschooling, as Christian parents. And so I felt like I did relate a lot to these people that I didn't even know that didn't live here. And so I was able to kind of get a lot of wisdom from that, from people that were outside of my circle who did have a different perspective on life and
Right.
eternity and stuff like that. I had to kind of
Dig. Yeah, you
so
had to go.
when I finally caved and surrendered, it was really hard, and every day I questioned, even when we made the leap and started doing it, I still would question every single day. And I found that that's a common thing that homeschool moms go through, that homeschool mom like doubt and guilt and
Mhm.
like, am I doing the right thing? Because you feel so responsible for everything,
Oh,
every
yeah.
aspect of not only their discipleship and of all that, but now their education. But you have to go back to remember your purpose and your why, and why are we doing this? You know, I'm not, we didn't start homeschooling necessarily because we think they're given a better education. Like, I don't think that she's going to get into an Ivy League school because we're homeschooling. That's not why we're doing it. I had to remember we're doing it because it's discipleship. It's a lifestyle, um, not just the education, and not just so she can have like 10 different extracurricular activities during the week.
Right. Yes.
It's like we're doing it to be different. So it is going to feel different. It is going to feel countercultural
Mhm.
because
Yeah.
it is, because living like Jesus should be countercultural. So I just had to continue to remember that and remind myself of that. And, um, you know,
Yes.
so
You're
it's,
giving us so many mini sermons right now. I mean,
yeah.
okay. All right. So, um, do you feel like do you feel like there was a turning point? Like, I know grief lasts, but do you feel like there was a turning point from like the bathroom floor to like being able to find
Function and
yeah,
find joy.
yes.
Yeah. Yeah, I think so. I don't know if I can pinpoint one certain time where it did turn a corner. Um, but Josh described it really well the other day. We were talking about, like, if you're driving in a car and you're making all these like hairpin, really um, sharp curves. That's how we felt in the beginning. Like, we just constantly were sharp curves everywhere we turned, boom, boom, boom. Um, and we felt like now we've kind of the curve has lessened. We still have times of grief, but those sharp curves they're not as sharp and they're not as often. So we still are kind of leaning in. Things still are not, like, I feel like we'll never be the same. Everything,
Right.
it's changed. And I think for me, like, we'll never feel complete. Like, my family is never going to feel complete. I'm always going to feel this void
Mhm.
on this earth. Um, like, there's always going to be a little piece missing. Like, even I do remember there were times when I finally, because for the longest time, anytime we would do anything as a family and the girls would be like laughing and having fun together, it was still there was still an element of sadness because I'm like, there's supposed to be three little girls laughing and having fun.
Mhm.
So for a long time, it was just always such an obvious void that I couldn't have joy in that moment. I couldn't have joy watching my kids play in the backyard together. But I do remember there was a time where I felt the joy. I felt like a little bit of pure joy seeing them play. And like, I knew there was still obvious. I know Brecken's not here, but I remember thinking like, okay, like we're going to make it. We're going to make it. We're going to survive this. And I think when I fully accepted that losing Brecken was God's will and that was part of his plan, because for the longest time I couldn't accept that as his will.
Can you
But when,
describe, and if you can, I mean, I don't know if I can. So I'll just, if you
yeah,
can't, that's not, just don't. But that internal resistance, like what, it's almost exhausting. Like
yeah,
it feels like this internal wrestling match. Like,
yeah,
because
yeah,
it's not actually, you don't feel like it's going to change anything, like to accept that,
right.
but but
Nothing
but
changed.
right.
She still is gone. Um, and we still miss her. And but yeah, like you said, I feel like internally, maybe the peace, there's not that struggle of trying to find that peace. Um, and I don't know, I think just time, and I don't know that there was anything specifically that like I read in the Bible that was like, oh, okay, now I get it,
Right.
um, or just one day where I felt like, okay. But I think it was a combination of little things along the way, just reading God's word and studying his word and just all the things that just added up, little by little to where I finally maybe had the big picture of, okay, God is good. He is sovereign. Nothing is going to thwart his plan, and that our time on earth is not done until he says it's done. And I guess when I finally just, I don't know, just fully accepted that in my heart and my mind, it sort of changed. Like when Josh went to India last month. Actually, when we recorded this podcast, the first podcast, he was there. He was still in India. And people asked me, like, how are you feeling? How are you doing? Like, are you scared? Are you anxious? Are you worried about him being there? Like his safety or just all that in general, because that could cause a lot of anxiety. And I was like, I really, truly was not. I was like, I do not have any fear or anxiety because God has called Josh to a purpose. And until that purpose is fulfilled on this earth, he's going to continue to serve the Lord. And so I just I think that was one of the things that I could say like yes to. Like I didn't go to India, but I was totally okay with him going
Right.
because um because I'm like, God's not through with you. So I'm not worried that something's going to happen, or even if something bad does happen, like if you get thrown in prison, I mean, God forbid, that would be awful. But um I know that's part of God's plan and that he has got you. Like it was just,
Right. There, yeah, you're doing the same life in the same way with a
yeah,
different lens, a different a shedding of that weight that wasn't like yours to carry. I
yeah,
think about it like in labor, uh like late women have vast stories of their like labor
mhm,
experiences. But I
yeah,
just
yeah,
remember, and I never like stayed this way throughout hours and hours of labor, but I remember if I focused, and even I would say this happens even in like exercise too. If you're like focused if you have a focal point and you
mm,
stay there, the exact same painful experience can be done in a different way, or you can feel it differently. And I think it's the same of like if you're focusing on the Lord, if you're focusing on what Christ has done, then
mhm,
the same experience goes a completely different way. Like you have the experience differently, even though
yeah,
it's the same
yeah, nothing
experience.
changed, yeah, the same Just yeah, that's a great way to put it, like your focus and
And yeah, I think it goes with that eternal perspective as well.
Mhm,
And I don't know about you, but I have my children have a great barometer on whether they're not saying they don't know whether I'm focused or not focused, but they can tell when I'm shifting
mm.
one
Oh,
way
yeah,
or the
yeah.
other. Um,
That's good. Yeah.
the accountability is real.
Mhm.
Um, so yeah, but I feel like it is difficult. It's such an internal process that it's hard to describe.
Yeah. Yeah,
Um,
it is. It's hard to describe, and there wasn't like it's hard to say, like, "What changed for you? How did it change? How did you get there?" I'm like, there's not like one passage of scripture that spoke to me in a special way, I think it was just the constant seeking the Lord and the constant focusing on the Lord and only Him to find my joy, my strength, only through Him, not my circumstances, not my children's happiness, not,
mhm,
um, s you know, whatever's happening in my life. It just truly focusing on Him and just staying in God's word is just so important. Um,
right.
it's just
And I know your book is bathed in scripture. Um,
Mhm.
I am like a big I love like Ann Voskamp kind
Mm.
of writing.
Oh, yeah.
And I,
Yeah,
but it
my
also
book is not like that.
her
It
writing's
is not
very decadent. I feel like it's
flowery and,
yeah, like with all the descriptions and all of the
yeah, I
and
I can't write like that.
yeah, so right, and
It's
I mean,
beautiful,
I
but
aspire to be that, and
oh,
then,
yeah.
yes, but your book, uh, it just provides an element without that, and I think some
Yeah,
people get very distracted by that kind
yeah,
like, her writing can be like, "Where were you going 6
I think
paragraphs ago? Did you
that's
where
me.
can you get there?"
I'm very no nonsense, I think, just like, "Here you go."
But it is, it's beautiful, and it provides. Like I said, I feel like it could definitely be a small group study that could go
Mhm,
to the masses for
mm,
sure. So it
yeah,
and just you let the word speak for itself
right.
almost,
Well,
like
that
you
was
just
my it was like,
uh,
I wanna share my story, but this is not a Brooke's story, this is God's story, and so that's why what I wanted to just turn to point to Him in every aspect of my story of what He has allowed me to go through, and so it is full of scripture, um, because that's what I wanted my focus to be, and
mhm.
that's where I wanted people to look to Him and not, finish the book and know more about God, not more about me.
Right, right. No,
Um,
it definitely and I
so that was my goal. That's my goal.
yeah, and you accomplished it, and you don't need to be Ann Voskamp. Uh, and not everybody can get on board with the way she writes anyway.
Right. Amen.
So I realized, and I kind of already knew this, but when you put the verse in there, I posted it today. I think it's Proverbs 35, where like God's word is true.
Mhm,
The like He's always speaking the truth, and that kind of
mhm,
helped me get over a hump as well because I would say I probably value truth over so many other values. Like truth
mhm.
matters to me
Yeah.
so much, and truth equals love. Truth equals safety to me.
Mhm,
Truth equals
mhm,
wisdom. All the
mm.
other elements flow from that, and I had to get back to that like okay, he is the truth, and if that's what I'm seeking, then like what you're saying, I have to look through the people, I have to look through
Mhm,
the circumstances, I have to look
mhm.
through the environment to him, because that's where the truth is going, where it's going to be found.
Yeah.
uh so I know what I want to ask next, but I want you. it was interesting the reason I was gonna go this direction anyways, but what you brought up earlier. So I want you to talk about rainbows and how those became significant for you before I go into this next question.
Okay. Yeah. Um, so the day that Brecken passed away, I did not see this, but Josh saw a rainbow in the sky. And other people have told me that they did as well. Like there was a rainbow the day that she went to be with the Lord. And um, I thought, I was like, wow, that's really cool. Um, and like a few days later, a friend of mine gave me a wind chime that was like multicolored, all the colors. And she wrote a little note in there about rainbows and about how this reminded her of Brecken because she now could see all the colors of the rainbow because she was blind on this earth. And she was saying like even colors that we can't even perceive on this earth, she's seeing the full spectrum of all the colors that God created. And that was so cool to me too. I was like, wow, that was just it was just a beautiful thing to hear. Um, just brought me comfort. And so we hung up the little wind chime. We still have it. It's since like faded and all that, but just when we would hear those little wind chimes, it would make me think of Brecken and just how she is in the presence of the Lord and can see all the colors of the rainbow. Um, and we started seeing rainbows in the sky, like just randomly. Um, and I felt like that was just God showing us that he's still here, that he still loves us, that he still keeps his promises. Um, and it brought me back to, what the rainbow was for in the Bible. He put his rainbow in the sky after he flooded the earth as a promise that he would never flood the earth again. And so it just helped me remember that to reflect on all the other God promises of God in the Bible, that he is a promise keeper. And I can rest in that, he promises the promise of heaven. Like I will get to see her one day again. And as a believer, I will go to heaven and live with him forever. And, just all the things that we could reflect on. So we were going on our first family vacation after Brecken passed away. And um, it was a hard trip because she wasn't with us and it was just the four of us. And Ollie had just had surgery. She had just had her cleft palate repaired. And it was kind of a last minute thing. We decided, let's go. And so she was still recovering from surgery. She was like a year old and she had to wear these braces on her arms so she couldn't bend her elbows to put her hands in her mouth.
Oh my.
So yeah, because she couldn't mess with the
Right,
repair for
right,
like
right.
2 weeks. So she had her arms like this in her braces and she couldn't have a passy because that also was going to mess up the repair. And we decided to go to Florida. Let's go on a trip. And we were like in one bedroom condo because, we couldn't afford much
Right, yep, I
either.
know,
Like,
I know.
uh, and it was like 4th of July weekend. It was during COVID. It was crazy, but it was like, we had to get out of there. We had to get out of this funk um, and just live our life, just live, kind of try to be normal for a minute. But, um, anyways, so it was really hard. It was just a tough trip dealing with
Mhm.
Ollie too, on top of we were still like really deep in grief. And to go on this family vacation with one of our children missing. But like God just showed up. There was a rainbow in the sky almost every single day on that trip. I think we were there like 5 days and there was a rainbow like 4 out of the 5 days. And, it would be like some mornings it was when we woke up and because Ollie was cranky and didn't sleep well without her passy.
Right.
So one of us would have to get up and stroll around the parking lot, stroll her around, and we would see a rainbow. And it just, I took it to be like specifically for us, maybe there were probably other people that needed to see that rainbow too. But at the time, that rainbow was for us. And that was God reminding us that he is still a promise keeper and he's
Mhm.
still there. So that just became such a special kind of sign in our life. I even got a rainbow
Right,
tattoo,
yeah.
and it has Brecken's name in Braille on the rainbow. Just as a reminder to me, like just an encouraging thing for me to see that God is still with me. He still keeps his promises. And people have gifted us like with rainbow things. And um, so now we have a lot of just special little things in our home that we can feel that just remind us
Yep, yeah.
of God's faithfulness, and just little reminders of Brecken too, that she's in the presence of the Lord. And so that's been just a neat little
Mhm.
special symbol to our family.
And then what do y'all do once a year? Um,
So, um, so on the anniversary, well, it started on the anniversary of when she passed away. Um, the first year we um, we went out of town. We went to go see our friends in Murfreesboro because it was still so real and raw, and we didn't know what to do. We were like, we feel like we should celebrate her life, but like, how do you do that? And
mhm.
so we're like, let's just go be with our friends there. They were willing to have us and just kind of be with people who loved us and have been there for us, and just kind of get away. And a lot of our friends from here like gathered at our home and released balloons, and kind of took a video of it and sent it to us and set it to
Oh,
music.
okay.
Um, and so that was so cool. And of course there were like rainbow items, like we had like a little, um, all the balloons were all like rainbow colors and stuff like that. Um, and then the second year they did something similar. I think they put balloons in our yard, and this was COVID. The year of COVID was the second year, or maybe the year
Mhm.
after COVID, but it was still bad. It was still, people were still getting really sick, and I think we all had COVID, so like we couldn't be with people.
Oh, okay.
And so they came and put little balloons with little notes in our yard, and so we've since started. That's been kind of an official thing. We've started every year around the anniversary. We don't do it on the date anymore. But around that time, we have like a Brecken walk. Several of my friends organized. It's called Brecken's Miracle Mile. And we get together and we all wear purple. That was just kind of the color for her. That just reminded me of her. And she always wanted purple things. She couldn't see purple, but she always said that was like her color, her favorite color.
Okay.
So I don't know what she thought purple was, but but like she would have something purple and Harper would have something pink, or she wanted purple walls in her room, or that was just kind of her color. And so purple always reminds us of Brecken too. Just she had a lot of like purple things that she wore too, so maybe that was part of it too. She looked good in purple. So that's what we do every year. We get together and we all wear purple and we walk around the park, and it's a mile, and then we release balloons. And um so it's the first year they did it, it was a surprise. I didn't know that they were going to do it. And so every year though, since we've been more involved in the planning, and now it's just an annual tradition that we do. And I mean, it's just so special, and it's overwhelming really how people still care and still remember Brecken and still love and still
Mhm.
know that that's a hard time for us, and are still there to celebrate her life and remember her and pray for us. And so it's a really special time. And I guess I thought, like, when they did that the first year, I thought, well, that was really sweet. That's just like a
Right.
1 year thing. Like they're not going to do that again. I didn't expect anything. And they continue to do it. And now it's just something that we do every year. And um, I've since used it as sort of a fundraiser for an organization called Spreading Sunshine in
Okay.
in our community. And they it's a Christian ministry, but they help families that have children with pediatric illness and critical illnesses, So they do all kinds of things. One thing they do is they serve meals in the hospital, and
Oh, okay.
they have like a adopt a family kind of program where they have a sunshine family for a year, and they meet with them and um, send them gifts and cards and are just kind of there for them. They provide like the community that we had.
Right.
We had such a great community that our church did so much for us and are still there for us. They kind of become that community for these families that don't have it or that maybe live out of town, that come out of town for their treatments for their child or for hospitalizations, or that aren't involved in a church, or that don't have family.
Right.
So Spreading Sunshine comes alongside and is that community for other people. So we've used the last 2 years, we've used it as a fundraiser, and I've been able to get more involved in their ministry as well. So that's been a beautiful thing to come out of this as
Yes.
well.
The
Mhm.
purposes are unfolding.
Yeah, yeah, they really are. um, just more and more that we're able to see now, just little bitty things of, yeah, the purposes of going through what we went through and how that is being used for God's glory in different ways.
Mhm. Okay, so sorry, I was struggling with my phone there for a minute. I was trying to find this thing. I downloaded an app this morning that was gonna help me not be on my phone as much. So it shut
Oh,
down, it shut down
uh-oh.
all my apps, and I was like, how do I get
Oh,
okay,
no.
what if I want my app? I figured that out. But so when I messaged you some of the questions last night, this particular question, can death be a mercy, actually came up when I believe it was in 2021. The girls and I went to the Ark encounter,
Mhm.
and that and they there's a lot of reading
Yes,
that
we've
that has
been
to be. Okay,
twice.
yeah.
Yeah,
I wasn't quite prepared for
a lot.
the reading as
Yeah,
far as, like, the age, group of
yeah,
what we had, because I really wanted to do a lot of the reading, and you can't
and
do
they didn't. I mean,
yes.
they'd get bored with that. Yeah, yeah, we've experienced that as well.
But the one thing that stood out to me, and I Googled it this morning to see if, there was a record of it from the Ark encounter specifically, but it pointed out to me that death is a mercy. Like, it can be a mercy from God, and this is one of the things that they have highlighted when you're there, because
Mhm.
that Noah's Ark, even though people want to decorate with it for young children, is actually a very, devastating
Mhm.
situation. And so this is what it says. Death is viewed as a mercy from God, but as a consequence of sin and as a release from a fallen world. According to this view, death is a mercy because it is seen as God's action to limit the spread of sin and its effects, offering an end to suffering. This is
Mm.
contrasted with the ultimate mercy of salvation from sin through the sacrificial death of Jesus Christ, which the ark can symbolize. So, in that, like, I was experiencing a different kind of death, not um, really just the death of what I thought what my family
Mm.
would look like and how things would go. But
Yeah.
I was able in that moment to see that it was a mercy. And honestly, the way that our family is built now is much better, for my children. Even their encounter with their father is better because of that. And
Yeah.
and a lot of people, I'm not advocating, and I'm not saying that people need to subscribe to that, but
Yeah.
this is my
Right.
experience. This is what has happened. So, what can you see death as a mercy, like, based on that perspective? Or can you see that, like, I know you've come to the place of, like, this was God's will, but
Yeah.
can you see it as a merciful act? And I'm not telling you that you should. I'm just wondering your
Yeah.
thoughts on it.
Um, you know, I I think that's part of what I told myself after, after Brecken passed away that it was merciful that the Lord took her when he did. I think that's part of how I reasoned it, like, because you just want to understand so much in the beginning and you just want to know why. And I kind of viewed it that way as like, well, she was about to be put on a long waiting list for a heart transplant. And she was already had this crazy, I had explained in that first podcast about her ventricular assist
Mhm.
device, this crazy huge machine she was hooked up to that she was going to have to live life on for months and months while she was awaiting a heart transplant. And then even getting a heart transplant doesn't guarantee that everything's going to be okay. I mean, that's a big deal. I worked for a short time in the liver and kidney transplant department at one of the hospitals here. And those people continued to suffer even after their transplants. It was not just, all right, live your life. You've got a new liver. They still would reject their new liver. They would get sick all the time.
Mhm.
They were on heavy doses of immunosuppressant drugs to try to prevent them from rejecting
All
their
right.
liver. But
Mhm.
in that, they would get sick. They would get all other types of diseases. They would get hepatitis easily. just, it was not an easy road. And so I can only imagine heart transplants are the same way. So I kind of, and this was before COVID hit as well. This was the year
Oh,
before
right.
COVID. So when COVID came, we kind of looked at that like maybe it was merciful that God took her that time, because who knows what would have happened during COVID. Um, how she could have like potentially suffered, or our family could have suffered even more watching her suffer, or just what we would have had to go through. And um, so in that way, that's what I tell myself. I don't know, obviously, God's ways, but so much could have continued to go wrong and could have even been worse
Mhm.
for Brecken on this earth. So in that way, I do see that as sort of a mercy. Um, and ultimately for the believer and for a child who is, young, that doesn't understand, under the age of accountability, you know, death is not the end.
Right.
It's a gift. That's like, you know, um, that's their refuge. And there's a verse in Proverbs that says the righteous has a refuge in death.
Mhm.
And Psalm 116 says that precious in the sight of the Lord is the death of his saints. So, you know, it's not, that's why we don't grieve as others who don't believe that. Um,
And ultimately, we're the ones that are left behind here that
yeah,
are
right. So,
suffering.
she is, and that's what people kept telling me, that's what people say to you. Like, she's no longer suffering. She's whole. She can see, she can walk, she can run and jump. All the things she couldn't do on this earth, she's doing now. And you think that would give you comfort, but
No,
I
you
mean,
want
it
her
does.
here.
But
You
it's
want her
like, but I want her here, but I miss her. I want her with me. And I guess that like it is a selfish thing, because it's like if she's up with the Lord, she's in the best place. Like, she doesn't want to come back here. She's in a better place. Like, she's exactly where she's supposed to be. She has the ultimate gift, which is the
Mhm.
presence of the Lord. And, so in that way, yeah, she is way better than we are. And she doesn't have to go through all this suffering that we have to go through on this earth.
Right.
Um, but it doesn't take it away from the pain and the,
No,
that we
no,
miss her, and I want her with me here.
no.
So,
All
yeah.
right. That I think that is a beautiful way to end. But if there's anything else that you want to share or anything like, and you don't have to, like, this is where we can end, or if there's
Yeah,
something
I
that,
mean, I think everything I wanted to share, like, as far as, you had asked me in the beginning about, like, what would I tell somebody or what would I wanna share with somebody that is either walking through a hard time or will be walking through a hard time in the future. I feel like we hit on all
okay.
those points already that I kinda had in my head. Um, you
uh,
know,
how are you finding joy in 2025?
I think, like, like I've already said, my joy is in the Lord, and I think I've just really embraced that just in this past year, like Paul says in Philippians, rejoice in the Lord always. I will say it again, rejoice. He says rejoice in the Lord, like it's not our circumstances, it's not anything else. And I think previously I was trying to find joy in, and you can still find joy obviously in aspects of your life and in your children and your husband and your friends, and you can be thankful for all those blessings that God gives you. But even if those blessings aren't there, like when we have hard days or when we do feel isolated because of something we're going through that nobody understands, or we feel like we can't relate to people, sometimes even our friends don't get it because they haven't been through what we've been through. I can still find joy in my salvation and who God is and what He has given me, in the gift of Jesus. And that alone is something to rejoice in. And so I think that's my focus now, that no matter what happens and whatever, goes on in my life, Jesus is constant and nobody can take away my salvation. Um, that's a sure thing. So I think that's my focus. So
Right.
everything else can be blessings, all the other good things that are going on. Um, but joy in the Lord,
Mhm.
truly.
And that's the out I would say those other things are the outpouring of that because, like you were
Mhm,
even saying, some of those things that should be joyful could be sorrowful. But if you are finding your joy in the Lord, if you have that focal point, those joyful things can be joyful again. Like you
mhm.
can experience life again. I think you are a fantastic representation of that. So, and
Thank you.
I am beyond grateful that you have shared. So, for
Thank
me
you.
personally, and
I'm
I can't wait
glad.
to even if we don't know it on this side of heaven, the impact
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
that it gives. And I know you've already heard some feedback because I'm sure people even in your world, like you said, don't know everything,
Mhm.
and so
Yeah. Right, they don't, or people I've become friends with since losing Brecken, they didn't know Brecken. So there's a lot they don't know, they didn't experience, they didn't walk through with us. So I've had a couple people reach out about, that stuff they didn't know about, and that they're just, that they were encouraged by, that have nothing to do with what I'm walking through. I have my aunt is one who is walking through a hard thing that has nothing to do, she's going through a trial, it has nothing to do with, like, the loss of
yeah.
a child
Mhm.
or anything, but, she was encouraged. She was like, "That podcast was so encouraging to me." Like, I think it did shift her perspective on what is important and what matters, and that God is still with her and still loves her and is walking through this with her. So, I love that it doesn't mean, that even people that are going through something totally different than what I've gone through, can still be encouraged and,
Mhm.
um, by this. So that's, that's the hope.
Yeah, and you're Are you still leading a Bible study? Are you still
Yeah, I am
okay?
still doing that. So, for now, we're about to wrap up. We have like a couple more weeks. So we'll see where the Lord takes it.
Oh, I'm telling you, I feel, and I don't wanna pray for you in a way of, like, praying for patience because I don't wanna put you in any more uncomfortable any more than you want to, but I
Yeah,
see things opening up in a huge way with this book.
yeah,
And I already know that you're open to saying yes. So,
yeah.
but
Right. It's kind of scary. So, but we'll, but,
it
you know,
is. Yes, it is. You have a story to tell, and it is super impactful. So I just pray that the Lord just leads you in ways that you are impacting people in
mhm,
a multiplying of the disciple
mhm. Yeah,
kind of way.
right.
So
Yeah, that's
thank
my
you
heart.
very much,
Well, thank you so much for having me.
and make sure, yeah, once the book comes out, uh,
Yeah,
to
that's,
blast that out too. All right, thank you.
get on that. Finish it up.